You get this whole social interaction, learning skills, and all the rest of it. The wellness organization, the Wellness Foundation, tied in with Wellspring, does a lot of cancer care support, post-operative and things like that. So they actually provide not only health management, but physical education programs and things. But a lot of times people have to go physically to where it is. The new kinds of communications will allow them to deliver that into the home. So there's a lot of services that will support the volunteer organization as well. This is an interesting one. You can get pill bottle caps now, so that sends out a wireless signal every time you take the top off the cap. So if somebody in their home, you are monitoring them, well, that's good. They took the cap off. The problem is you don't know if they remembered still to put the pill in their mouth. But I just said, well, just put a little chip in the pill, and they're getting pretty small, these chips, a piece of dust, and so we'll know what's happening there. But that's another opportunity. Now, as to building networks, there are all kinds of things. If you take a, let's say, a 30-story condo tower, it's likely that they'll have 12 different networks controlling different things. One is for access control, one might be for the elevators, one's for fire, another for video surveillance. And as I say, typically they will have 12 networks. And the opportunity now exists, and some big builders are getting into this, to actually create one network in the building. This is called intelligent buildings. And so if somebody pulls the fire alarm, immediately the surveillance camera turns around and looks at it and says, well, who pulled the thing and what's going on? That's just one little example. But just the opportunity to have all of these things interacting with each other is just a great opportunity. I mentioned this idea of a community portal. Well, this is a steal of the portal in Västerås, Sweden. And so if you want to talk to a nurse, it's a mock-up of a town square. You click on the building with the red cross. You want government services, you click on the mock-up of the government building. Community center, this is interesting. The innovation center, that's a virtual innovation center. If you think of a job, a service, a company, a business or product, you go and you register it in there. And other people are always looking, and somebody else says, gee, that's a great idea, let's work at it. And once again, they're collaborating at a very high speed, which is totally different than talking today. I mean, when you collaborate at a gigabit per second, it would be like talking on a phone, you'd think, once you get up there. Just amazing. And they've created 600 new companies just in the last 3 years in this small community because of this virtual innovation center. So it just provides the idea and the kinds of things you can do. Let me come back to the model that I talked about just briefly. Remember the 5-layer model? So I'm going to show you a way of looking at some of the measures of what's being done according to these 5 layers: place, infrastructure, collaboration, ecosystem, and so on. So there's a thing called a spider diagram that people sometimes use for measuring and displaying measures. And the idea behind a spider diagram is you can have different dimensions on this circle. Let's call it A, B, and C. And now I can take a community A and then a community B, and I can plot them so that they look a little more different. And if you're way out at the end of the circle, then you're in a leadership position. If you're at this part of the circle, well, you're competitive, and if your measures only bring you out here, then you're kind of poor. And so what we're doing is taking those 5 layers, remember in the 5-layer pyramid, and saying, okay, these are the layers. Now let's look at the assessments that we might want to look at. Once again, competitive, fair, and poor, and leading. And then I can start to look at different communities and say, well, how are you doing? What are the measures? Well, these are the measures. And just to, I'm not going to read them all off, but I'm not sure if you can see them at the back. But, you know, under life, it's learning, social cohesion, play. Under infrastructure, obviously transportation, communications, energy, and so on. And solutions, all the E solutions. And then we, within those categories, determine particular measures. So what are we going to measure, and what will it look like, and we'll go from there. And then we can plot the different communities against, and we could plot Windsor against other leading communities and that sort of thing, and see where are we leading and where do we need to pick it up. So how do you get there? Well, here's a roadmap to intelligent, I just call it, to abbreviate it, W/E, so I didn't have too many dashes. Now, the good news is you're partway along the roadmap. Like, you've been doing some great things, but I suspect you may be coming to another phase where you kind of update the strategy and you move it along. And you want to be building it on this communications infrastructure, and then this is the different application areas, e-learning and so on. Well, then you start to get into, okay, so what do we do this year and next year and so on. You keep moving it along. That then allows you to say, can't quite see the lines, but this one is referring to 2011. You know, keep mobilizing the leaders. You have that now. Whether you want to evolve it at all, you need to decide. And what are some of the outputs? And then you do the same thing for the other parts. And these are good ways to communicate to people what are we doing and where are we going. And so what's the secret to success? I suggested, Stephen Covey did a great job. Everybody bought into it for individuals. And the fact is, as I looked at it, I thought, well, you can also create the 7 habits of highly intelligent communities, which really follow his 7 steps to highly successful people. And it really, it ties right in. So it's not a bad way to look at it. And then you can also say, well, so what is it that we have to do? Like, that's nice to have all that stuff, but what are we going to do, you know, as we go farther in terms of actual things to do? Well, you develop a roadmap. And you've done this, and it's led you to being one of the top 7 communities in the world. So obviously the decision is, well, okay, we're still on the knee of this curve here. How do we both keep up, and how do we keep moving to get ahead further and build on the heritage and the capabilities that Windsor has? And so it starts with not only the roadmap, but then benchmarking, the advisory council. Often people keep evolving their advisory council depending on where they're at. They need the ultra broadband plan, ultra broadband, I have to stress, create working groups, and then define the implementation strategies. And you know, we have in Ontario, quite uniquely, 2 communities that were among the top 7, Windsor, Essex, and Stratford. And iCanada is all about having 50. Because we say, well, how do you measure what's iCanada? And anyway, how do you make it an intelligent nation? And the reason behind creating iCanada was to say, you know what, we've got this problem too. We're ranked 22nd out of 30 in broadband in the world, out of the leading 30 countries. Our innovation index is going south, and so is our productivity index. So let's create the intelligent nation, and that turns all those things around. So we've said, well, let's get 50 communities all competing effectively for the Intelligent Community of the Year, because that would be a good measure. And so we're working on that. But I was thinking the other day, I was in Stratford talking with their mayor, and it's nice to say, well, we're going to do all this. What might be some natural things for a community to do, for Stratford to do and Windsor to do, if you buy this idea that we're really moving through a revolution into a new world, that's very hard to predict, but we know what's happening. So I said to Stratford, you know, let's look at Stratford. Well, Stratford, England perhaps, but now Stratford, Canada. If we're talking about new ways of communicating and it's going to keep evolving, who better than Stratford to be the seat of, hey, we've been in the communication business since the theater got going and all the rest. Maybe Stratford evolves and says, well, we're going to try to be a world leader in that whole world as social networking evolves and be at the forefront of it. They'll do other things as well that are economic focused, but and then I thought, well, Windsor. Now, so Windsor's different. You've got a great industrial base here. You're doing other things. What's the other thing Windsor has? Well, Windsor is, you know, right across the border from Detroit. As this world evolves, imagine the whole issue of how do countries communicate with each other in the future. And it seems to me there's a great opportunity to say, well, boy, if Detroit and Windsor and then Ontario and Michigan wanted to really get some things going about new ways of communicating and changing old regulations and rules and everything else, what a great place to have a research center on all of that. So I was just kind of throwing that out as I was quickly saying, well, how do you, and I know you're doing other things too, building off the automotive industry into other industries where you use those skills, but it just seemed to me that that's a fairly unique characteristic of Windsor, just the border. And I know you're already doing things. You wheeled the guy from New York across in a gurney to let him get tested over in Detroit. But just a couple of ideas that were floating around in my mind. And so what it's really all about, you know, these learnings and the solutions to making Windsor-Essex a great place to live, learn, work, and play, and keep connected with the world. So thank you. That's my overview, and I think we have a little time for some questions if you'd like to, and we can have some afterwards as well. Thank you.